So, this story starts with me doing something super ordinary, helping my sister move. She was upgrading from a tiny apartment in Michigan to a small house she rented in Indiana for a new job. We had packed her whole life into boxes and were driving a rented U-Haul down I-69 on a Saturday morning. It was supposed to be simple: unload the truck, get her settled, grab some pizza, and head home by Sunday. But of course, nothing ever goes as planned, right? We arrived at the house around noon. It was small, but cute in a retro way, with a detached garage and a big oak tree in the front yard. The landlord had left the keys in one of those combination lockboxes on the front porch. My sister, Lisa, opened it while I stood there holding a box marked "Kitchen Crap." She got the door unlocked, and we both froze for a second when it creaked open. The house smelled weird. Not "Someone forgot to take out the trash." Weird, but stale, like the inside of an old closet. Lisa wrinkled her nose, but shrugged it off. "It's probably been sitting empty for a while," she said. We started unloading the truck. At first, everything was fine. The house wasn't spotless, but it wasn't disgusting either. The carpets were kind of ugly, faded blue with some stains, but it wasn't a deal breaker. The walls had that typical beige paint landlords use when they're trying to cover up scuff marks. No big red flags, really. Then, while I was carrying in her TV, I noticed something. There was this door in the hallway, right next to the bathroom, that didn't look like it belonged there. It wasn't even painted the same color as the rest of the house. The other doors were white, but this one was a dark, glossy brown, and the handle was an old brass one with scratches all over it. It looked out of place. "Hey, Lisa," I called out, setting the TV down in the living room. "What's with the weird door?" She poked her head out of the kitchen, where she'd been unpacking plates. "What door?" "This one, next to the bathroom." She came over, wiping her hands on her jeans, and stared at it for a second. "Huh? I didn't notice that when I toured the place." It didn't seem like a big deal at the time, but something about it bugged me. Maybe it was just the way the brass handle felt cold and slick when I touched it, or the fact that the door didn't match the rest of the house. I turned the knob, but it wouldn't budge. It was locked. Lisa shrugged. "Probably just a closet the landlord doesn't want me to use. Maybe they keep cleaning supplies in there or something." She didn't seem bothered, so I let it go. The rest of the day was uneventful. We finished unpacking, grabbed burgers from a diner down the road, and hung out watching bad TV until midnight. I crashed on her couch, planning to head back home in the morning. But then, at about 2 a.m., something woke me up. It wasn't a noise exactly. More like a feeling, like someone was watching me. I sat up, heart racing, and looked around the dark living room. Nothing. Just the glow of the streetlight outside coming through the curtains. I figured it was just me being jumpy. New house, unfamiliar sounds, whatever. I lay back down and forced myself to go back to sleep. The next morning, I was packing up my overnight bag when Lisa came out of her bedroom looking pale. "Did you hear anything last night?" she asked. "What kind of anything?" "I don't know," she said, rubbing her arms. "I thought I heard. I don't know footsteps. But when I got up to check, everything was quiet." Now, Lisa's not the type to get freaked out easily. She's usually the level-headed one between the two of us. So, seeing her rattle put me on edge. I tried to brush it off. "It's probably just the house settling," I said, repeating the same thing I had heard 100 times in movies. She nodded, but I could tell she wasn't convinced. As I was getting ready to leave, something stopped me in my tracks. That weird door in the hallway? It was open. I'm 100% sure it was locked the day before. And now, it was open just a crack. I stared at the door for what felt like forever. My first thought was that Lisa must have opened it, but that didn't make sense. She'd been as clueless about it as I was the day before. My second thought was that maybe the landlord or someone else had come in. But that didn't add up either. Lisa had the only set of keys, and the deadbolt on the front door was still locked when I woke up. "Oh, Lisa?" I called out. She came out of the kitchen, holding a coffee mug. When she saw where I was looking, her face went pale again. "I didn't open that," she said before I could even ask. We both stood there for a second, neither of us wanting to move closer. Finally, I grabbed my phone and turned on the flashlight. "Let's just see what's in there," I said, trying to sound braver than I felt. The door creaked open with a slow, groaning sound, like it hadn't been used in years. Behind it was a narrow staircase leading down into the basement. Lisa groaned. "Oh, great. A creepy basement. Just what I needed." It didn't feel like the usual basement setup, though. The walls were made of old, uneven bricks, and the stairs looked like they were barely holding together. There wasn't even a handrail, just bare wood steps covered in a thick layer of dust. I shined my light down there, but it didn't reach the bottom. The whole thing felt wrong, like it shouldn't even be part of the house. "Did the landlord say anything about a basement?" I asked. Lisa shook her head. "I don't remember seeing it on the listing, and I didn't notice this door when I toured the place." She looked at me, and I could tell she was hoping I'd suggest we just ignore it and move on. But now that I'd seen it, I couldn't just leave it alone. Something about that basement, it felt off, like it didn't belong there. "I'll check it out," I said, grabbing the flashlight from my car. "Are you serious?" Lisa asked, her voice rising a bit. "What if there's, like, rats or mold or something worse down there?" I forced a grin. "Then I'll come back up and tell you to call the landlord." "But what if there's something cool? Like old stuff people forgot about?" She rolled her eyes, but didn't stop me. I took the first step down, and it creaked loudly under my weight. The air immediately got colder, and I could feel the hairs on my arms standing up. By the time I reached the bottom, I was regretting my decision. The flashlight beam landed on the floor, and I realized it wasn't concrete like I'd expected. It was dirt. The whole basement had a weird, unfinished feel to it, like it was never meant to be part of the house. In the far corner, something caught my eye. There was a small, rusted metal cabinet pushed against the wall. It looked ancient, like something you'd find in an old school or factory. The doors were slightly ajar, and inside, I could see a stack of papers. I walked over and tugged one of the papers out. It was brittle, yellowed with age, and covered in handwriting that was hard to read. But one word stood out clearly: eviction. I pulled out a few more pages. They were all old legal documents, eviction notices, foreclosure papers, even some arrest warrants. The weirdest part? They all had the same last name as Lisa's landlord. "Oh, Lisa?" I called out, my voice echoing slightly in the cold basement. "What?" she yelled back from the top of the stairs. "You might want to see this." By the time she came down, I had a small pile of the papers spread out on the dirt floor. She crouched next to me, her eyes scanning the documents. "Why would these be down here?" she muttered. "And why would they belong to my landlord?" "I don't know," I said. "But this doesn't feel like normal landlord stuff. Why hide it in the basement?" Lisa frowned, then stood up and looked around the room. "Wait, what's that?" She pointed to the wall opposite us. There was something hanging there, some kind of old, yellowed map pinned to the bricks with rusty nails. We walked over to it, and as soon as we got close, I realized it wasn't a map. It was a blueprint. A blueprint of the house. Lisa's eyes widened as she studied it. "This doesn't make sense," she said, tracing the lines with her finger. "There's a whole section of the house on here that doesn't exist. Look, this part right here." She pointed to an area marked as storage on the blueprint. It was drawn in just below where we were standing. But in the actual basement, there was nothing but solid dirt. Maybe it got filled in? I suggested, even though I didn't believe it. She gave me a skeptical look. Or maybe it's still here. Lisa was already pacing around the basement, her flashlight scanning the walls and floor. I stayed by the blueprint, trying to make sense of it. According to the drawing, the storage area was supposed to be directly beneath the living room. But as far as we could see, there was nothing in the basement but dirt and a few bricks sticking out of the wall. Lisa stopped suddenly, crouching near the far corner. "Wait," she said, brushing away some loose dirt with her hand. "I think there's something here." I walked over as she uncovered a thin metal handle, almost completely rusted over. It was embedded in a flat, rectangular piece of wood that blended into the ground. A trapdoor. "No way," I muttered. Lisa yanked on the handle, but it wouldn't budge. "Help me," she said, gritting her teeth. Together, we pulled, and with a loud groan, the trapdoor popped open, sending a puff of stale, earthy air into our faces. Underneath was a narrow passage, barely wide enough to fit through, leading further underground. A rickety wooden ladder was bolted to the side of the opening. "This is officially the worst idea ever," Lisa muttered, but I could see the curiosity in her eyes. She grabbed my flashlight before I could protest and started climbing down. I hesitated. "You sure about this? It could be dangerous." She looked up at me, her face illuminated by the flashlight beam. "We've come this far. You're not chickening out now, are you?" With a sigh, I followed her down. The ladder creaked under our weight, and I silently prayed it wouldn't collapse. When I reached the bottom, I found myself in a narrow tunnel with low ceilings. The air was damp and smelled like mildew. Lisa pointed the flashlight down the tunnel, revealing more of the dirt walls. "What even is this?" she asked, her voice echoing slightly. "Maybe an old storm shelter?" I guessed, though it didn't explain why it was hidden under a trapdoor. We started walking, the flashlight barely cutting through the darkness. The tunnel twisted and turned, and after about 20 feet, it opened into a small square room. The first thing I noticed was the table in the center. It was old and scratched up, with papers and notebooks scattered across it. On the wall behind it, someone had nailed up more blueprints, some of them torn and curling at the edges. Lisa picked up one of the notebooks and flipped it open. The pages were filled with scribbled notes, diagrams, and what looked like inventory lists. But none of it made sense. Most of the writing was in shorthand or code, with random words like shipment and decommissioned standing out. "What the hell is all this?" I asked. Lisa didn't answer. She was staring at something on the far side of the room, a large metal cabinet, like the kind you'd see in an office or archive. It was dented and rusted, but the door was slightly open. She walked over and pulled it the rest of the way. Inside were rows of file folders, each one labeled with a name. Some had small photographs clipped to them, black and white and faded. "This is creepy," she said, flipping through the files. "It's like records of people. Look, addresses, dates of birth, jobs." I leaned in to get a closer look, and that's when I saw it. One of the folders had Lisa's last name on it. "Oh, Lisa?" I said, my voice shaking slightly. She froze, then slowly pulled the folder out. It was thicker than the others, stuffed with papers and photos. The first thing she pulled out was an old photo of a woman who looked a lot like Lisa, same nose, same eyes, standing next to a man in a military uniform. "That's my grandmother," Lisa whispered. "I think that's my grandpa with her. But why would this be here?" We started flipping through the other papers. Most of it was incomprehensible, random dates, names, and what looked like financial records. But there was one document that stood out. It was a typed memo, stamped with a faded government seal. The words at the top sent a chill down my spine. Confidential, Operation Redacted. The rest of the memo was riddled with jargon, but we pieced together bits and pieces. It talked about relocation, discrete observation, and something called Asset Monitoring Program. The more we read, the less it made sense. Why would any of this be hidden under a rental house? Lisa was pale, flipping through the folder like she was searching for answers. Do you think this has something to do with my family? My grandpa was in the military, but I never heard about anything like this. Before I could respond, we both froze. A sound echoed down the tunnel, the faint creak of wood, followed by a slow, deliberate scraping noise. Is someone here? Lisa whispered, her voice barely audible. I grabbed the flashlight and pointed it toward the tunnel entrance, but the beam didn't reach far enough. My heart was pounding so loud I could barely hear anything else. Let's go, I said, grabbing Lisa's arm. We shoved the papers back into the folder and bolted back down the tunnel. By the time we reached the ladder, the scraping noise had stopped, but neither of us wanted to stick around to find out why. Back in the basement, we slammed the trapdoor shut and pushed an old shelf over it. We didn't say much as we climbed the stairs and locked the weird brown door behind us. The next morning, Lisa called her landlord and asked about the basement. The landlord acted confused, like they had no idea what she was talking about. When she mentioned the blueprints and the hidden room, the line went silent for a moment before they brushed her off, saying the house was old and had quirks. Lisa moved out 2 weeks later. She never got a straight answer about the basement, and to be honest, I don't think she wanted one. As for me, I still think about that folder with her family's name on it. What was it doing down there? And what was that tunnel even for? I don't know if it was some abandoned government project or just some eccentric landlord with a bizarre hobby. But one thing's for sure, we'll never rent a house with a mysterious locked door again.